Hi guys, today we'll have a look at Sylvia Plath and her poem Lady Lazarus. But before we unpack the poem in greater detail, I've included a key context that may be relevant for you to make note of in understanding the poem better. So we know that Plath died in 1963 by committing suicide, but it wasn't the first and last time she had attempted suicide. In fact, her first suicide attempt was when she was just 19 years old. In Lady Lazarus, we follow Plath and her experience of being brought back alive. And whilst resurrecting like Lazarus seems to be on the surface a miraculous experience, it seems as though that it potentially wasn't for Plath, who had wanted to end things for good. Now, but before we unpack the text in a bit more greater detail, if you haven't done so already, I want you to pause the video and then have a quick read of the entire poem so that you could get a general gist of what the poem is about. Now, let's start from the top. The opening line in I've Done It Again makes use of the ambiguous diction of it, and here audiences initially can't recognize what the it is. And here the use of short sentence or end stop line that is being created by the full stop is able to encourage us to contemplate before we move on to the rest of the poem on what the poet has done again. So here, the diction of again is able to add to the notion that she does this act repetitively. So it's not something that she has done once, but she has done over and over again. And then moving on, we have the metaphor of a sort of walking miracle, which directly alludes to the biblical story of Lazarus, where Lazarus had been resurrected from the dead. But here, Plath devalues the miraculousness of being resurrected from the dead through the diction of sort of before equating herself with the Jews who had been oppressed under the Nazis during the Holocaust. So this is evident in the simile that her skin was bright as a Nazi lampshade and her face was featureless fine Jew linen. I also want you to consider the imagery that is conjured upon her question on whether she terrifies. It's almost as if she wants the enemy to peel off the napkin and then look at her face and then think she's terrifying. Now, moving on, we have the synthetic listing in the nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth. And here it creates a sense of detachment that Plath or the speaker feels with her body, wherein she does not see herself as a whole being, but she starts to objectify and deconstruct each part of the body. Just also make note of how this section holistically creates this sense of decay. Pay attention to the word sour breath and the imagery that is being created in the flesh the grave cave ate. Then see how when she says a smiling woman, it kind of becomes a little unsettling because we don't really associate smiling with death. So it kind of becomes like, why is she smiling? What is the intention behind the smile? But as you can see, the entire section is just full of connotations associated with death. And we see that once again in the proverbial simile that she has, like the cat, 9 times to die. Now, here, the metaphorical language that is adopted in annihilating each decade is reflective of her attempts at suicide, but considering the diction of trash, that seems quite colloquial in that it sounds a lot more like spoken language, we might be able to perhaps say that Plath ironically is referring to the societal perceptions that surround her suicide attempts. And then, if you have a look at the next section that follows, Plath puts a little bit more emphasis on this idea of performance. So, the million filaments become a synecdoche in which it serves as a representation of light bulbs that further goes on to represent the idea of performance or stage. And then the imagery of the peanut crunching crowd shoving into sea. I think this is quite important because it really enhances the notion that Plath feels as though she is being used as a source of entertainment, where she's forced back to life and then she's objectified, put on display for the peanut crunching crowd to see. And then see how the language adopted in Big Striptease and Gentleman Ladies further enhance this idea. But one interesting thing you might make note of here is that she becomes directly involved in this performance, whereby she isn't just being objectified by others, but when she says, Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees, she actively partakes in the objectification of herself. But nevertheless, Plath says that after being resurrected from her death, she is the same identical woman. The high marital language here is able to reiterate the suffering that the speaker must endure, in which she's being brought back alive only to live a life that she does not want to live. The desire for her to last it out is evident in the simile where she claims that the second time was not merely an accident, but she had intended to not come back at all, as she rocked shut as a seashell. The juxtaposition between the words worms and pearls in the simile further enhances the serenity that Plath associates with the experience of dying before she's being brought back alive. Now, here Plath makes an ironic assertion that dying is an art. I do it exceptionally well. And it's ironic because she obviously is not very good at dying if she has failed multiple times. Then the anaphoric I, as she describes how she does it so it feels like hell, it's so it feels real, is enhanced by the active verb choice of do that reflects the power that Plath seeks to assert over her own death. Yet the repetition or the diacope in the same place, the same face, the same brute is able to emphasize how once she is brought back alive, she's brought back to the same life that she had tried to escape from. It's actually this process of being resurrected that knocks her out, not the actual act of dying itself. As she says that dying, it's easy enough to do it in a cell, it's easy enough to do it and stay put. That is, following the amused shout of a miracle, her resurrection then becomes to be on show as spectators are charged for the eyeing of her scars, hearing of her heart, and there's a very large charge for a word, touch, bit of blood, piece of her hair, or her clothes. See how the last bit is also polysynthetic. Then, in paralleling her doctor, her enemy, Plath acknowledges how it is those who bring her back alive who are her enemies. Indeed, the diction of her, that is translated into Sir from German, is able to enhance the notion that it is male figures that continue to oppress her and have control over her life. Consider this in light of the patriarchal society that Plath is writing in. Now, in the next section here, Plath further objectifies herself as she claims, I'm your opus, I'm your valuable, the pure gold baby. Ultimately, she's not being brought back alive in order for her to receive the help that she needs, but rather she's merely being objectified in having to be brought alive for the sake of the doctors. We could also see how this idea is enhanced through the possessive diction of your in I am your opus, I'm your valuable. And then moving on, the epizeuxis and ash ash, coupled with the imagery of poking and stirring, only to find nothing there, is able to capture the sense of futility in the experience of dying, whereby in the next section, the synthetic listing of a cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling, could be interpreted to reflect how nothing is actually left of her upon cremation, except for the things that she had once possessed. But by the end of the poem, she gains a little bit more power, and that's evident in the direct address to God and Lucifer, where she tells them to beware, beware. And instead of her being resurrected as the same identical woman, she claims that she'll rise with my red hair and I eat men like air. Here, the act of rising out of ash is symbolic of a phoenix, and as she eats men like air, we could potentially say that she now seeks to assert power over men or over those people who have tried to assert their power and control over her. So that is it. It was a little bit of a longer poem, but I hope this was helpful, and I will see you again soon.